Okay, we know I had to leave you because I had to go teach financial accounting. Okay, and I'm back. Yay! Okay, so we're going to use documents to create a record of transaction. Okay, um, your third party, your bank statements, your invoices, your contracts, any of those items are third party evidence. They hold more weight than an internal created document. Okay. When you create internal documents, and I've had to, like, for example, when you go in and you look at your vacation pay and you look at how many hours each employee is accrued and whatnot, and you do a calculation on Excel, keep the data so that if anybody asks you a question, an auditor's looking at it, just say, hey, this is where I got that piece of information, and you've justified your adjusting entry. So that's just kind of one of the things that you're going to learn, as you go into accounting and as you go working into an office. If you have some accounting programs, you can go in and see what user did what. QuickBooks, you can do that. You can actually even limit access to certain areas in QuickBooks in a lot of your accounting programs, your good accounting programs, your software programs, you can do that. So pay attention to that. Just like, we went into that sale and we saw the certain cashier that went in and did all that stuff. We saw that she had done that and we could trace it back, and then we could see how many times she went in and changed sales documents. So that's how we were able to terminate her. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Banks prepare suspect reports, and that has to do with the checks cashing, going in and out quickly. Having a document in order to initiate a sales transaction. So here's your control environment. Now, we did this in financial accounting. Remember the control environment? That management philosophy and operating style and modeling ethical behavior. It doesn't matter if you are looking at like I said, ad hoc, which is your creativity people. Those are your Google people, your Microsoft. Those people come up with these different tech things and create things. And then you can have a clan, which is your teamwork, hierarchy, which is your people who are black and white. This is the policies, procedures. We're going to stay with it. Here's my box. I stay in it. Or sales. It could be any of those organizational cultures. You're going to want, it doesn't matter. You want your management to be the pillar of ethics. You want them to do everything, and you want them to be the modeling the appropriate, this is how we're going to behave at this place, regardless if sales are the focus or not. And when I did my research, I found out that it didn't matter which type of organizational culture was going on. It mattered what, so what I was trying to prove was one organizational culture over another was going to have more financial statement fraud. And I wasn't able to prove that. But what I was able to show is that certain different organizational cultures, like again, ad hoc, plan, hierarchy, or market, they were more than likely to commit a certain type of financial statement fraud, which I find very interesting. So, again, effective hiring procedures, making sure you have your internal controls, you have your policies, procedures, make sure you have a solid accounting system. So make sure you follow up. I worked at a place and there was no fraud going on. It was just a big mistake. Nobody was double checking the payroll person's work. And they accidentally went in and gave somebody a raise, $3,000 more a year than what they were supposed to get. And nobody caught it for over 5 years. That's a big problem. So if somebody was actually looking at the expense report, they would have caught it. But the person that was in charge of that program didn't care. They just kind of blew it off. So it wasn't caught in time. And so eventually when they found the mistake, the person quit that was getting the their ill-gotten gains. And then they basically disappeared into the night. Now, we tried to go back and sue her to get the money back, because just because somebody makes a mistake doesn't mean you can profit from it. But she, like I said, she was long gone. Okay. Non-control, inability to judge the quality of performance. So they're saying here, sometimes you don't know if you're getting an inferior product or you're paying too much for it. Sometimes I probably do pay too much for stuff. I got it. There was one of those stupid storms about 5 years ago, came through and it knocked my entire 6-foot fence down in the backyard. And it's quite a bit because I have a half an acre. And so imagine how much fence that was. So it knocked it down. And so then I had to go and redo a fence. And I don't like the quality of work. And I paid quite a bit of money. But I didn't know any better because I couldn't find any other stupid people to come out and build my fence. So there you go. I got an inferior product and I paid a lot of money for that inferior product. So sometimes they can even charge for work not performed. So you're going to have to go in and you're going to get, sometimes you have to go in and double check things. Here their example is a dermatologist. I'm going to tell you that Medicare patients, in fact, I even think that my husband and I were victims. Well, it was him. He went to this doctor that I find very questionable and I don't like, and I think he's a shyster. And one of the reasons is I've heard of some of his legal woes, and he also doesn't have privileges at the hospital. So that kind of tells me that he's questionable. And I think they billed us, or they billed our insurance company for work that they never did on my husband. Tests they said they performed, but they never did. Okay. I don't know what everything is on my EOBs. I'm not a medical person. I should have probably paid a whole lot more attention to my explanation of benefits and double checked everything. Now I do. So lesson learned. Okay, non-control factor, failure to discipline fraud perpetrators. Like I was talking about, the Bob Little guy at AEA, I truly believe that he worked overseas before he came to Yuma. I believe that he was caught for fraud overseas, and they basically told him, get out of here, and we just want you to go away. And he snuck off before they prosecuted or even thought about prosecuting. I've seen a lot of cases where people they just want the person to leave and they don't prosecute them. They think it's not worth their time. Yes, it is, because that person is going to move on to the next company and they're going to perpetrate another fraud. Bobby McFarland, he's a prime example. So he's the dude. And I'll tell you, quite honestly, I think I mentioned him in chapter 1. He's that dude who went and tried to do that. I don't know, it was some type of concert out in the Bahamas on some remote island. And I saw him give a lecture where he was answering questions back and forth. He was on a big old Zoom and there's like thousands of people watching his interview. And I was like, oh, the poor baby didn't know what he was doing. Oh, he just got in over his head and didn't know how to ask for help. I really thought that after his interview. But then, because I always have a kind of, something in my brain going, are you sure? And so then I started researching the dude. I found out that he was being charged for a fraud before the concert one. And he was on probation, or he was in the middle of being prosecuted for it. I don't know, something like that. And then he committed another fraud. And then he went to the music festival. And now he's on to another fraud. Well, I don't know. He says he's going to put the music festival on. So, I mean, once a fraudster, always a fraudster. This Bobby McFarland, he charming, handsome, held himself up nice and, white collar crime right there. But he was a total fraudster. Okay, so if fraudsters are caught and if we actually prosecute them, it's a deterrent. Remember when I told you I watched an interview with a socio-psychopath who had committed some crimes against people. It wasn't necessary financial statement fraud, but they committed crimes against people, and they said, why did you stop? And he said, because I didn't want to get caught and I didn't want to go back to prison. That was his deterrent. You got to put that up there. Okay, discussion number 2. So summarize John Doe's employment and fraud history. He was never punished or prosecuted for his fraud. So, that's a little one, $200. Insurance sales. He was there for 10 months. He was office manager for 2 years, 1,000, bookkeeper for a year, accountant for 2 years, another one. And then he went to controller and CFO, probably got some education, and he stole almost $1.5 million. Because why did he increase? Because he got confident. Because he had more ability. He had more opportunities. Here is insurance sales. You only got a little bit of opportunities. Office manager increases the responsibility, and you can see it happening, increasing those responsibilities. Why was he able to increase it over 100 times? Because of the type of position he was in. He was the head accountant, and he had access to everything, and he could basically cover everything up. So the answer saying he had a significant authority. He had 6 years in the position versus only 2 years. Let's see, he'd gotten away with it at 5 other places, so he felt really confident in his ability to cheat and steal. So anyhow, that's just kind of sad. Makes you really sad though. Okay, many frauds are possible because victims do not have access to the information possessed by the perpetrators. And so here they're talking about Lincoln Savings and Loan case. Charles Keating and his son were convicted of fraud for creating sham transactions to make them look more profitable than it was to please regulators. The regulators weren't given all the information, so they didn't know they were shams. Okay, here's another one. I told you about my cousin. She banked with Wells Fargo, and she's one of those people who had a fake account created at Wells Fargo, and they moved money out of her checking account into that fake account. Well, she went to Wells Fargo and she started arguing and demanding to know where did her money go and get it moved back in there. She didn't authorize this transfer. And Wells Fargo fought her and fought her and fought her and wouldn't move it back until her father got involved and threatened an attorney and to go public with it. And then all of a sudden her money was back. They reversed all the NSF fees, but they didn't pay the NSF fees she incurred because of the checks not going through from the people she wrote checks to, like electricity and yada, yada, yada. So she didn't have the access to the information. So how is she going to figure out what happened? I only figured out what happened after, when they started talking about Wells Fargo in the news. Okay. At-risk citizens, people coming across the border. This sounds awful, but they're easy targets because they're so dependent on somebody. They're not educated. They don't understand what's going to happen. So older people, people with language difficulties. Okay. Here, a nurse was caught embezzling money from patients' rooms at a local hospital. Patients were unconscious. So, I mean, what are they going to do there? Older persons are convinced to take out mortgages on their homes. I still hear cases of little ladies saying that they have to send money to their fiance because they're a prince in Nigeria. I still hear things like that, even though we think now that should never happen. There are warning signs up at Walmart and multiple retail businesses that talk about this type of fraud. And they say, if you have any doubt, don't do it. With AI nowadays, they can do anything. So I had a student in my office and they were asking me questions, and I started talking about AI and all the things that's going to happen with AI. They are starting to use AI for those calls that say, "Mom, I'm in Mexico," one of those. They're starting to do that now, and they can completely sound like your grandchild, your child, whatever it is, your sister, your mother, whoever. So it's getting kind of scary out there. So in order to prove it, I went and downloaded an AI generated song. So somebody went into one of these AI programs and said, give me a song that sounds like Depeche Mode. And AI generated a song. Wasn't a Depeche Mode song, but it sounded just like David Gaughan, who's the lead singer of Depeche Mode. It sounded just like their tones, like their music sounds. It's not a Depeche Mode song. Totally just created this out of nowhere, this crazy song. It wasn't great, but it sounded just like them. So it's kind of really scary. And so a lot of artists are trying to figure out ways where they can copyright themselves and their actual picture or image, so that Hollywood can't just put them in movies without their permission by stealing their image. Crazy stuff. Okay, many frauds involve cash payments or manipulation of records that can't be followed. Smart employee perpetrators know that their fraud must be concealed by manipulating the financial records or hiding them. It's another one, hiding them, losing them. Okay, perpetrators usually manipulate income statements because their audit trails disappear quickly. That would be Bob Little. He created false financial statements that he gave to the board of directors at AEA. So, example, the controller for a real estate firm stole $100,000 over 4 years by having the company cover her credit card bill. Since expense accounts were all closed at year end, her fraudulent expenses could only be checked in the year they were submitted. If you're good at accounting, you can go back in there and double check. Okay, third element, rationalization. They owe it to me. They're not paying me what I'm worth. They make me work this overtime, and I put in so much after hours just thinking about my job. Nobody's going to get hurt. I deserve it. It's going to help me be a better employee. Something has to be sacrificed. Might as well be them, right? So those are some examples of rationalization. Okay, so here we go. A couple decides to get a dog. The husband buys a boxer without consulting his wife. The wife wanted a poodle, not a boxer, but won't say so. She rationalizes that she does not want to hurt her husband's feeling. Cost of the rationalization is she's going to have a boxer instead of a poodle. I don't know. My rationalization in that situation would be, well, I guess I'm going to have to go buy a plane ticket and go visit my grandbabies. Jim Baker's Praise the Lord Ministry, where contributions from television ministry listeners were used to pay for the lavish personal lifestyles of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. It was losing over $2 million a week when it closed. It was found guilty of 23 counts of fraud and served 5 years of jail time. Okay, start talking about Depeche Mode. Go listen to Personal Jesus. And I think they're referencing this in that song. They're talking about, just, call me on the phone and, just give me the money and all will be forgiven. Okay. Jerry Schneider embezzled nearly $1 million from Pacific Telephone Company. Greed and retaliation was his pressure. He had gotten into some telephone computer code book. His rationalization, because he wanted to commit the perfect crime. So, wow. Okay, here in the interviews, he said he's an honest person, but somebody leaves out unattended cash, they deserve to have it stolen. Wow. That's cray-cray. Now, you can look at this and you can do this if you want to. You don't have to. Self-assessment. What pressures do you encounter in your workplace? What opportunities are there in your workplace? Under what circumstance could you rationalize a fraudulent act? Think about that. And you don't have to answer. I'm not going to. Okay. And then we got the summary, and then I go, oh, because I'm done. Okay. I know this was in 2 videos, but that's because I had to stop and teach a class. And I wanted to make sure I got this video out before you start your chapter 2.